I think many a time, especially in very masculine-based professions, whether it's you'd find that there's a different understanding as to what discrimination is about. Again, going back to Timor, when the domestic violence law was promulgated, the way in which you create that path of access to justice is where at every stage the stakeholder or those who are involved supports that access to justice, that pathway to justice. So who are we talking about? We're talking about the doctors, we're talking about the police, we're talking about the prosecution service, we're talking about the judge. But what was happening when just before it was promulgated, and there are many incidents where you find women who are battered or sexually violated going to the police, and the police keep telling them it's a family affair, go back home. So what do we have? First, we don't have a police report. And if the police do take them to a clinic that is open at that hour, the doctor doesn't ask these questions, but just puts a Band-Aid and stitches it up and goes back home. So what's happening here? What's happening here is that there's no evidence to corroborate what's happened in terms of what's happened at home. And as a result, you're already creating a hindrance to access to justice. What happens in a more so that's institutional injustice happening to this particular woman and many others, but it's systemic in the sense that when it then goes to court, you have a judge that's sitting up there, and remind you, Timor at that time was a relatively new country, a judge who has come through a cultural system like all the elders and all the others with that background, who has just had some education about maybe what CEDAW is about. So when he presides, and there were a few cases that we were sort of doing a watching brief, and we noted the way in which the judge was responding seemed to be suggesting either it was her fault or she shouldn't be complaining about these things. Because again, going back to cultural norms, in Timor, like in some other jurisdictions, and they have got this cultural norm system called adat, which is the balake. Balake is like the price for a bride. So because of this system of balake, women are treated as possessions in that sense, in which case, once they are, in a way, bought over by the men, the women's side of the family cannot have anything to say about what happens to her. So even in the traditional justice system, this is interesting, even the traditional justice system where, for instance, the woman has been battered by the husband, her side of the family cannot provide any evidence. More so, she can't provide any evidence herself. So it's just the perpetrator and the traditional justice system, people who are involved in that system, that then dispenses their form of justice.